to 15 minutes.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. This is a session that I originally was not going to participate in. And then Dr. Alam suggested maybe I would want to participate in. And so I am very pleased to do so this morning. Leadership for women in a changing environment. One of the things I'm looking at is the environment is definitely changing. Women have been leaders throughout history, but much has changed in the 4,000 years since Hatshepsut was the first female and longest serving female of Egypt. And a couple of thousand years later, then Cleopatra ruled Egypt. And some of you may have heard of Boudicca. She was the warrior queen of ancient Britain. She fought Nero's, well, she even recruited people and fought Nero's forces trying to force Roman forces out of Britain. And I know that many of you have heard of Joan of Arc, who led the French army in victory in Orleans in 1429 against the English. What do all these women have in common? They were all warriors. It's very interesting. Historically speaking, only warriors were seen as fit rulers or leaders. And this was for males as well as females. So if you wanted to be a leader, you were expected to be a lawyer, maybe. But much has changed since then, thank goodness, because I think many of the women you see sitting here, we are warriors in some sense, but not in the traditional sense. But much has changed. The environment has changed. Societies began to change. And part of the impetus for the change was the women themselves. The suffrage movements in the 1800s were one of the major changes in the environment. And this was the idea when women said, hey, we've got a voice and we're going to use it. They started protesting, they marched, they said, we demand the right to vote. And in 1893 in New Zealand, they achieved the right to vote. Now, one of the things we find that in 1918, Iceland women were given the right to vote. In the US, women were not given the right until 1920. We go along in Great Britain, it was 1928, France, 1944, China, 1949. And I'm pleased to say in 2005, Saudi Arabia gave women the right to vote in local elections. They don't have national elections, so that was very good. I'm of the generation which was called the initial phase of the second wave of women's rights in the US. This relates to Target 5.5, health and reproductive rights. This is when women said they wanted control of their own body. And this was the 1960s type generation that was led by two women. And what you have here is Betty Friedan, who wrote The Feminine Mystique, which changed many people's thinking of what it meant to be a woman and what was the potential for women. And then you had Ms. Magazine came out, and they started forming the National Organization for Women in the US. And this was a powerful lobbying group which changed many laws in the environment. In 5.5, it talks about women's equality in politics, economics, and public life. The pictures I have here are two political leaders, Giorgia Meloni, and we have Salwa Zed, who's the president of Ethiopia. She served for many years, which is amazing. And then in economics, I have Christine Lagarde, who is president of the European Central Bank. She's a woman I have followed for many years, and she really is a powerful leader in the world of finance and economics. And then I have two other people here. And remember, this slide was prepared many weeks ago. I was going to say, Michelle Obama is someone that many people wanted to be the Democratic nominee for president. It didn't work out that way, but you've got to see that she is in public life, and I greatly admire her as a leader. She is a leader, even though she doesn't hold a position. And I also have Taylor Swift here. That's in public life. How could you possibly not consider someone who has millions and millions of followers not being a leader? She is so influential. And talking about influential, in the last decade, we have developed a new category of leaders that I never expected to see before, called influencers. All of you here have probably heard of influencers. These are people whose entire career is to become an influencer of other people. I don't know how to describe this type of leader because it's something that I was never familiar with. But social media, the technology has allowed this whole new type of leader to develop. Now, barriers to being an effective leader. The previous presentation talked about some of the factors within self. Is some women do not feel confident in a variety of things, that the issues, they don't want to be leaders. But there's also factors within others, which I'll talk a bit more about. Then there are factors within organizations. And the example I like to give, I happen to be a Methodist. It's one of the largest denominations of the Christian religion. And women could not be leaders in my religion until after 1956 because you needed to be an ordained minister to lead. In the Church of England, you could not be a leader in the Church of England until after 1994. The Church of England went along with this. And one of the things that I find religion is one of the organizations that is, in many cases, rather than promoting women, has held them back. In 2004, there was a group of Islamic scholars in New York that started the Women's Mosque so they could lead their own mosque going along with it. So there are factors within organizations. It's not just religion. Many organizations have barriers. And then there's the factors within the changing environment. The previous speaker talked about social norms. There's no question the social norms have changed. One of the things we talk about, the way people dress. In my day, and I have to say, this was the appropriate time for a woman who wanted to be a leader. Have you seen what young ladies wear today and what people on the red carpet wear? The influencers on the red carpet? My mother would have not let me out of the house with that type of attire. It's changed. Religious dictates, globalization, the whole idea of immigration. You have a fusion of cultures. This has definitely changed the entire environment where you operate. When you're dealing with multicultural environments, you're dealing with diverse groups. It's a challenge for any leader to lead a diverse group because they have different value systems, they have different, perhaps, languages. Even the language may be speaking English, but different people speak it differently. This was brought home to me my first morning here, where I wanted to get some utensils to eat my breakfast. And I asked about silverware, and they said, oh, you mean cutlery. And so therefore, even though we all speak English, it's very different. Now, one of the things you find is, as a leader, you have to interface with the public. And yes, this was done a few weeks ago. As you see, I have Kamala Harris. What I'm saying is leaders in public interface represent either an organization, a cause, a group, or themselves. For example, when Kamala Harris speaks in her role of vice president, she is representing the US. She has to be aware of this. It's not just Kamala Harris. She's representing 300 million people in the US. So therefore, you have to be very conscious of what's going on. Sometimes with a cause, whether it be environmentalist or something, you have to be aware that you're representing that and you're going to represent it 24/7 because social media is such they're going to pick up anytime you deviate from what is expected of that particular cause or group. Then there is yourself, and those include the influencers, and very definitely you find Taylor is there. She represents herself, but at least she does have talent compared to the Kardashians. And so therefore you have slight different going along with it. But it's important to recognize as a leader, you're going to represent someone. So hopefully you have the same values as that organization. And one of the things when you prepare for interfacing, public speaking is very important for leaders. And therefore, you need to know what the message is, who your audience is, and with diverse audiences, this is much more difficult. Networking is essential for leaders. That is what's setting you apart. And this is one of the things that every woman should develop the network. There is a book out called Your Invisible Network, and it suggests you pay it forward. Mentor young ladies who can later then become part of your network, and many times they can help you as well as you help them. I said the paradox of women leaders. This was an HBR article that said, expectations of women leaders are they should be demanding, but also very caring. They should be authoritative, but yet participative. They should advocate for themselves, absolutely, but they should be servant leaders for others. And they should maintain distance, but be very approachable. I have here the balancing thing. Many times trying to balance when to do which of these. How do you balance these various expectations with different groups? This is one of the things that you have to consider as a woman leader. You have many skills that women leaders have. When I first started giving workshops for women leaders, it was back then it was called Women in Business or Women Management. There were these basic skills that we taught, such as conflict management, change management, communication skills, nonverbal communication, delegating. But many young women know these skills today, because when I got my MBA, there were only one other woman and myself in a class of 125, 2 women. Today, over 50% of the MBA students by university are women. A big change has happened. They are gaining the skills. And one of the things women leaders need the basic skills, and I have these here. But these skills you're going to have to recognize can only get you so far, because the most important trait of successful leaders, in my opinion, is adaptability and flexibility. You have to recognize the environment in which you're operating. One must adapt to the changing environment. In some cases, you can change your environment. As the women's suffrage did, they actually changed the environment for women. But my advice to women, for the most part, is always have a plan B. And as our previous speaker told me yesterday, you need a C and a D as well as a B. And I think that's true, because many times what you really plan is not going to work out as well. So you always have to have a backup plan, because when the internet went down earlier this week, what happened? You had to adapt, you had to adjust. And this is a real strong point of an effective woman leader. And what I'm saying is the workshops today should consider this new environment. It's not just teaching the traditional skills that I had on the last slide. It's looking at the environment, how is this changing, where women can change the environment, and how they can adapt to the changing environment. And would you believe that I am finished?